cut right off my notes. But I am one of the professors, along with Laura Grayson, for the course titled Crossing Borders, Islam and the West, which we taught last spring, so spring 11, as a short-term study abroad course. It met all semester and then culminated in a trip of 2 weeks to Spain and Morocco. The course material combined cultural politics, taught by Dr. Grayson, and literature. And what we did was to look at the history of the Arab, Islamic, Christian, and Jewish populations that lived amicably in southern Europe until the year 1492. So we looked at that history, the history of Islam, and then we looked at what has happened since that time. The script, which will be presented by some of the students from the trip, is taken from their journals, which they kept during the time of the trip. So it includes reflection, but it also includes the immediacy of their experience, and we hope that you appreciate them as much as we did when we read them.
There were 17 of us on the trip, which included Susan and I, as well as 2 faculty members, Allison Hicks and Cecilia Beach. So we had 13 students. We've got 5 of them here with us today. I'm just going to introduce them briefly. Michelle Zajac, Samantha Danek, Nick Walker, Sarah Deitch, and Genesis Vanderhorst. They are going to be reading selections from their journals. You'll also see photos from the trip. There's one student whose journal entries are in here, and he couldn't be with us, Jonathan Kane. Nick is going to be reading his selections as well. So we're going to let them take it from here.
In Chefchaouen, we climbed the tower and looked out at the city. And while we were up there, we got to really hear the call to prayer. It started in the mosque right next to where we were, then spread to the rest of the city. Up away from the noise of the street and the market, it was even more distinct and haunting. The call to prayer is one of those things that really sticks with you. It makes the hair on the back of your neck stand on end and gives you goosebumps. The entire time we were there, I never really got used to hearing it. And now that I'm home, I find myself missing it a little. That was one of the things that kept reminding me just how far from home I was.
Today is the first day of our travels. It's strange how it doesn't feel real. I've spent so much time preparing for these days to come that I don't know if I'm awake. We have not arrived in Spain yet, but to think, In that just a few hours, I'll be the farthest away from home I've ever been.
I was overwhelmed by the beauty of Granada, the architecture, the streets full of clothing stores as if I was walking on 42nd Street, the gorgeous women in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s dressed fabulously, rocking heels on pebbled floors. My new goal is to walk a whole day in heels before I leave Granada. The way the restaurants are set up with a ton of chairs and tables outside, a stand in the front showing what their meals consist of, a small restaurant area where the cooking takes place, and finally the transition of how you go from city to narrow hilly side streets composed of beautiful colored doors of light blue and light green, vibrant colored flowers and leaves stretching throughout an entire wall, and the view of a castle from a distance with 3 flags flowing.
We arrived in Granada today. After about 16 hours of traveling by plane, train, and automobile, I expected to be tired and ready to sleep, but my excitement is rendering this prophecy false. I am ecstatic. I am in what must be one of the most beautiful places in the world. Granada is extraordinary. The heat is not the oppressive element back home, but rather a happy companion reminding me of the sun. Everything has a different odor. The people, the buildings, even the water seems to be fundamentally different from anything I've ever experienced.
Later in the day, when we had some free time, Michelle and I wandered into a bar to try the summer wine that our guide had mentioned. It turned out to be the oldest bar in Granada. It wasn't very crowded. There were 2 bartenders, 2 customers who I suspect were their friends, the curing meat hanging from the ceiling, which was real, not fake, we asked, and the 2 of us. We had a little Spanish between us, and one of the bartenders had pretty good English, so we stumbled through ordering our drink and begged some cheese for our tapas, which went amazing, by the way. The summer wine was as tasty and refreshing as we had been told it would be. I was surprised by how much I liked it, but apparently it was a weird drink to order. Everyone else at the bar, all 4 of them, were making comments to each other about our strange, clumsy American behavior. I felt even more like an outsider than I might have otherwise, because we weren't that far outside. Michelle and I knew enough Spanish to know that they were making fun of us, but not enough to know what they were saying. It was a bit strange. We were neither connected nor disconnected enough to be able to establish where we stood, or at least that's how I felt. In the end, though, I think it was a successful interaction. We got some delicious wine and cheese and had a cultural experience, and the guys at the bar derived some amusement at our expense. A fair trade, we decided.
The Alhambra Palace is so much more than I could have imagined. It was both spectacularly beautiful as well as practical. I can imagine now why the Moors lasted 700 years in Spain. The architecture was both pleasing to look at as well as practical. It was their beliefs and philosophy manifest. Every part of the Alhambra that I visited, I wanted to stop and inspect every stone and every arch. It's just so amazing that such a feat of engineering was accomplished by people that were not only rulers, but philosophers, architects, mathematicians, scientists, alchemists, doctors, and writers. The gardens were beautiful and reflected the tastes of the former owners, though the engineering behind the irrigation system has remained from the time that the Muslims first came to Granada. The Summer Palace was both spectacular in its architecture, yet simple to look at. Easy to tell that the Sultan was someone who enjoyed the view and the feeling of power that grew looking out over his kingdom, but also enjoyed sitting by the citrus trees and enjoyed listening to the flowing water of the fountains, feeling the cool breeze blow across the mountains. I could not imagine how Granada must have looked back when the Muslims were at the peak of their power, what the Red Fortress must have looked like for a Christian or a Jew or even a visiting Muslim when they entered the city and saw the imposing facade of the fortress poking up from the top of the hill and through the trees.
Today I became an outsider, a person who doesn't know where they belong. We rode the train into Algeciras from Granada today. To begin, I will explain. So far, Spain has been an experience in which I felt as though I was a tourist, and that meant in some way I belonged. We met and noticed other Americans. We were the same as them. Arriving in Algeciras changed my idea of our travels. I have not been thinking ahead as an attempt to avoid nervousness and overthinking. Granada felt like a new place, but the people were warm and the city felt light. We met patience as we struggled with Spanish. Getting off the train, it felt like another city, another world. We didn't see any other tourists. Not many people were out and about, for that matter. A handful on the street, the prostitutes on the corner, and a few men at the cafe. These streets were not filled with children at night. No one stared as we walked by. No one cared we were there. We were just another body in transition. I felt like I was there not to be noticed, and I should be gone before someone does. The streets were dark and dirtier than Granada. The night was quiet and dark. A restless feeling came from the mumbles of my surroundings. The uneasiness of becoming a welcome intruder tomorrow looms, and the impending culture shock feels real. I feel foreign and stereotypical. I have luggage, I don't speak the language well, and I don't look like I belong, although I couldn't describe to you what I would look like to fit in. The transition I am taking is reflected in my surroundings. Alan stated that it was a bad idea to walk around at night, especially alone. This alone confirms the mood of my mindset, the rundown buildings, the endless closed shops. He also said that it was a port city, a place where Moroccans and Spaniards met, and they didn't like each other. This compounds the feeling of displacement. Then who does belong in Algeciras? I can understand the resentment on both sides, but no amount of understanding could make me feel welcome in such a still and hollow place. I wonder who calls this place home.
This morning we walked through the fish market in Tangiers before going to visit the Darna Women's Center. As soon as you walk into the market, your nose is assaulted with the smell of freshly slaughtered fish. Everywhere you look, there's a different type of fish, eyes open, mouth ajar. But you also hear the calls of the vendors begging you in to buy their fish. After moving through that market, we entered the meat market, buying bananas on the way.
Then we entered the meat room. There were more whole animals here, and I think it threw some people off. There was at least one surprised. Are those heads? From our group. It was something new and different, but I think it was a little more natural. This was meat identifiable as connected to an animal. It felt more respectful, I guess, than the American standard shrink-wrapped, sterile, and anonymous bits. There was more of an understanding here, I think, of where food actually comes from. I felt that in the produce room as well, but that was a little more familiar, like a farmer's market at home.
Today we traveled to Rabat and got assigned host families. The family we were staying with was very hospitable, though only one person in the household speaks English. I feel awkward with him because our conversations are forced. I stumble on my words. He gets confused when I struggle. His English is good, but moments often happen where we don't understand each other. I felt like saying thank you or dinner was delicious, but I was told by our host mom the word for thank you and had forgotten. I wanted to say something, but English felt rude. I was trying to be culturally aware without knowing what biases or attitudes I was bringing with me. I felt uncomfortable because I didn't know gender roles, ground rules, or any rules. I feel uncomfortable because I have left my comfort zone. I went to my room tonight to sleep, to write in my journal, and to be with only Sam, turning this foreign room into a place I can call home for now.
We ate the best food on the whole trip, sitting around that tiny round table on wheels with our homestay family. Today, our mother placed 2 large plates of mixed salad on a small table. I was relieved. Here at last was a light lunch. There's nothing better than cold salad after you've been trekking through the hot sun for the whole morning and afternoon. There was some finely chopped celery and onions mixed with tuna, and on the other side there was a plate with large chunks of lettuce and tomato. But no one sat down with us to dine. Genesis and I were confused. We'd never really ate until someone else from our family dug in or encouraged us to do so. So here we were, me and Genesis, and 2 giant plates of salad in the main room alone with no one else but the family's 2 pet kittens and a parrot named Suisse. Finally, Halima, our family's daughter-in-law, walked into the room and sat down. Genesis and I picked up our forks. Then Mother came walking out, holding a giant pan in her hands. It was a giant fish, head and all. Then suddenly the entire family laughed and began to clap, for while we were waiting for the meal to appear, the extended family had all sat down at the table, making it a total of 7 people eating lunch. I sized up the monster before us. He was huge, about 1.5 feet long and 6 inches wide. He still had his scales, but thankfully not his eyes. Finally, I said the only thing that could come to my mind in a situation like that. Wow. Halima and the rest laughed. The proper way to eat this fish was to just grab some with your fingers and dig in. As casually as I could without reflecting on how weird it was to be sticking my hands in a fish, I dug in. It was spectacular. There was something carnal and fabulous about eating a chunk of meat from a still scaly body of that fish. It tasted, well, like fish, but it was subtle, not overpowering. And the second surprise was that after a while of eating, we noticed that the fish had been stuffed with something like rice and vegetables. Even though we were complete outsiders to the conversation, everyone was speaking Arabic, I never felt uncomfortable because they accepted us and we accepted them. And in the end, we all loved devouring that giant fish.
Mint tea tastes like liquid candy. The tea is made with Chinese green gunpowder tea, spearmint, water, and lots of sugar. On to the first course, harira, or Moroccan soup. This dish is by far my favorite Moroccan food I've tried thus far. The soup's mild spices contrast with the sweetness of the tea. Mixed within the liquid are soft rice and lentils, giving your mouth something to chew on and your taste buds a bit longer to process the subtleties of the spices.
Today is my birthday. My host mother, a Bedouin who does not speak English, took me to the top of the house today, and we sat there mostly in silence. We heard the call to prayer, and she attempted to help me speak some Arabic, particularly words for the sky and stars. Arabic is a beautiful language. To be honest, I feel uncomfortable with my host mother. I feel like she is frustrated that we cannot converse, and I am of the same spirit. The feeling of not being able to converse with someone is extremely frustrating. Despite the welcome nature and the relative familiarity, the rooftop became a prison for me in that time where I felt completely useless. When the call to prayer came on, it was a welcome respite. It gave us a reason for silence rather than my inability to converse effectively. No gifts, no mother, no drinks. Overall, this has been a very strange birthday.
I still taste the hint of sweet, moderate spices mixed in the simplicity of the meal. It was just pasta, penne pasta, with tomato sauce, but more like a homemade tomato sauce that was still not too thick but not too watery, which the pasta soaked up perfectly. My homestay mom still added some unknown spices which enhanced the taste. It shows me that Moroccan dishes rely heavily on their spices to add a distinctness that sets them apart from other cultures.
Let's talk about Turkish toilets. Maybe it was me being naive or my total stupidity, but I never knew such a thing as a Turkish toilet existed. My only experience with anything weird about toilets was seeing bidets on House Hunters International. So yes, I was letting my culture rule me when I thought everyone eliminated their waste the way I did, the normal way in my eyes. Alan, our guide in Morocco, described Turkish toilets as a porcelain hole in the ground. He was giving us a sort of what to expect talk for our homestay families. The thought that I could be squatting to crap caused the beginnings of panic in my chest, but I remained calm, always the hopeful optimist. And turns out the homestay family did have a regular toilet. I praised Allah. It was forever a game of what's behind door number 1 every time I walked into a bathroom, with a more than 50% chance that the answer was the dreaded Turkish toilet. I ran, I hid, I scurried around Morocco, relentlessly holding my bladder in vows. But you can outrun fate for only so long. And finally, I succumbed to the Turkish toilet. No words can describe the dread in which I dragged my feet to the bathroom, pointed out by the oh-so-helpful waiter. This is ridiculous, I thought in my mind. Get a grip on yourself. It's only a toilet. But no amount of pep talk helped. Hell, not even a 100-person marching band playing Don't Stop Believing and baton twirlers in front carrying a banner proclaiming, "You can do it, Sarah," would have boosted my confidence. I have a Turkish toilet phobia. Which way do you face? It's so obvious on an American toilet. There's only one way you can sit on it. But with the Turkish toilet, things were not so clear-cut. I decided to face the stall door, hoping I could then defend myself if someone magically burst through the door against all odds. What to do with my pants? Did I just keep them around both legs? I attempted this, but before I could start, visions of me having to walk around in pee-stained pants for the remainder of the day danced in my head. I was taking no chances. I slipped my pants out of one leg and held them in my hand. Now it was the moment of truth. No, nothing awful happened. I didn't fall in. I didn't fall over. No one burst into my stall by accident. And thankfully, there were no pee-stained pants. The world didn't end. But as I left my stall feeling like a conquering victor, I couldn't help but realize how pretty helpless I was in this country. I was like a baby. I didn't know how to talk or eat or get around, and even something as simple as going to the bathroom had to be taught to me. But I am proud of myself that I overcame my stupid, irrational fear and attempted a Turkish toilet, even if I will forever prefer the porcelain throne.
To think that on the first day of class last semester, I had no idea what the word Medina even meant. Now the word is real. A Medina is a city, or at least a portion of a city, that is contained within high walls. However, the walls are not the only thing that separates a Medina from the surrounding area. A Medina has windy, labyrinth-like roads, varying in width from one person's shoulders to a car's width. Cars are not allowed to drive within the Medina walls. If one wants to maneuver in the Medina, then a mule or motorcycle is needed. We read about the Medina in Fez while reading Dreams of Trespass. In the book, Marinisi says that the French built the new city and left the Medina alone because they didn't like the city that was already there. After seeing many Medinas, I see why. The streets were built to ward off attackers and make invading difficult. There are over 9,000 streets. The difference between the Medina and the surrounding area is most obvious in Fez, due to the mix between the Moroccan and French construction. The Moroccans wanted to ward off attackers, which worked because the French built their city next to the Medina. The French built roads that are perpendicular and parallel, with roads of even driving width. Even the buildings themselves are different. Moroccans' homes are lavish and decorated on the inside, whereas the French decorated the exteriors.
Today was my aha moment. It happened while I was listening to Mohammed and his son sing to our group. The bus driver even joined, and they sang a song which I did not understand and could not recite a single line, but it was beautiful. I often feel strange when people sing because I know how tone deaf I am. Thank you for pointing that out a number of times, Dr. Morehouse. But to my ears, this song was completely perfect. I think it was a love song, but that is a pure guess. To be completely honest, I don't know what I figured out, but different items seemed to click in my mind when this song was playing. The history, the culture, the people, all of it seemed right. We were sitting under an alcove on Mohammed's farm, and a thunderstorm had just passed over. The flash downpour left the scent of rain all over, and the lyrics of the song, combined with the participants' rhythmic drumming, seemed to be the perfect melody at the time. I have loved this entire experience, but I don't think the pieces really fell together for me until I sat and just listened. Everything done here, whether it's based in faith or tradition, is an antidote to the great fatigue of loneliness. They're so focused on celebrating life and the relationship of God with his faithful that it pours from everything. Even the music is somehow a celebration, a swan song of a culture bound to its history and attempting to bridge the gap between modernity and tradition.
The place that made the scarves let the entire group try on a scarf and take pictures in them. I liked how it felt on me. It wasn't heavy, light on my head, helped keep hair out of my face, and surprisingly, it did not add to the hotness of the weather. I decided to keep it on my head for the rest of the day because everyone said it looked nice. When we got to the leather place, I was sitting by a window, pretty much shoving mint leaves into my nose because it smelled so bad in there. And the owner of the place asked our Fez tour guide if I was Moroccan. I was a little shocked because I didn't think to myself until then that I could pass for a Moroccan. A thought popped into my head. During my spring semester, my sociology teacher, Karen Porter, had stressed over and over to our class to put on our sociological eyes and notice the trends of society. And just then, I decided to do just what my teacher had asked. We left the leather place, and I started to notice how Moroccans were noticing me, and to my surprise, a lot of them weren't. During our tour of Fez, I remained in the back of the group, by myself, trying to make it seem like I was traveling alone, without the group, and during that time, Moroccan men didn't try to whisper some corny line in French or attempt English like they had when I didn't wear a scarf. Old women sitting on pavements and sidewalks didn't look up at me, and men didn't turn twice to get a good look. The scarf wasn't covering my face, but it still had an impact on how I was viewed, and so I got to experience firsthand somewhat of how a veil or scarf could shield a woman in Morocco from the lustful eyes and judgmental stares.
The veil felt itchy on my neck. The fabric was stretchy mesh, and a section was sewn together to put my face through. My host mom wrapped the rest of the cloth around my face. The dress that we put on had a hood that ended in a point. The fabric was heavy, and even the cooler evening was suffocating. We spent time in the clothes. We learned how to make mint tea. Even though we went straight back to the courtyard to drink it, I was sweating.
In Sefru, we toured the old Jewish quarter, including an orphanage and a synagogue, and we went to a Jewish cemetery on our way out of town. It's really interesting to see the evidence of all these people who were once here, but it's weird to think about how they're all gone now. Wherever we go, we see proof that Morocco once had a substantial Jewish population. The cemetery was huge and ancient, but that it's gone now. I found myself simultaneously fascinated and saddened by every disused synagogue we visited. At some point in the future, I plan to visit Israel. I wonder how I'll feel there when I get to see a Jewish community, both ancient and thriving.
We walked through an old Jewish cemetery today. I walked through the area and thought about how the Jews, Christians, and Muslims have such a diverse family of beliefs. Here, in a nearly complete Islamic nation, is a well-maintained Jewish cemetery. Elements of Islamic culture, Jewish beliefs, and even Christian essentials are everywhere and intertwined. So much so that they cannot exist without the other. Perhaps, rather than pitying this nation and these people, we should emulate them in this particular feature. Coexistence is a characteristic of this nation, not only recently, but an integral and prominent piece of its heritage. When the Jews were cast from Spain, they found a new home in Morocco. When they were abandoned by the Western world to Hitler, Mohammed V defended his Jewish citizens, proclaiming that they were Moroccans, and he did not make the distinction based on faith or ethnicity. This is an admirable portion of history, especially given the vast example of the opposite in much of my own Western history.
Oh my God, the hike was horrible, and yet I feel really good. I was huffing and puffing the first few strides, but I enjoyed it. The tour guide kept singing and talking to us in Arabic and some French, even though we really didn't understand. Throughout the hike, he would start singing songs or count in English, but stop by 3. I guess those were all the numbers he knew, but we helped him out and counted up to 10. I think about our tour guide and his possible life, but tried to begin to focus on the view. All the little bushes bombarding the mountains planted in them like polka dots. The field of marijuana plants we passed by. I had to take some pictures to show my mom. We also saw some horses, baby horses, and a few houses on the other side of the mountains, and then the Bridge of God. I was expecting to see this huge, majestic, amazing bridge, better than the ones in the city or the U.S., because of its title, I guess. But it wasn't at all like what I had imagined. The bridge was one straight passage between 2 grand mountains. It was simple and made out of wood, with the river right below it.
Today we crossed the Moroccan border into Spain. In class we had studied how Spain and Morocco's relationship is similar to that of the United States and Mexico. Many Moroccans attempt to jump the border into Spain illegally in hopes for a better life. We have seen many graphic and disturbing pictures in class of Moroccans desperately attempting this illegal act, but I don't think it sank in for me until I had actually experienced the border between Spain and Morocco.
I hated it. It was raining, and there were people everywhere trying to cross. Policemen checking your passports every time you stepped foot into a new area of the border. I had never felt so low, unwanted. The treatment of how they went about checking passengers for passports and the uncleanliness of the area from Morocco to Spain is in such bad conditions. Everything seemed hazy to me and gray. The entire morning was gray. At some point, I even felt a rush of sadness come over me. I started thinking about how do Moroccans feel about this border. Are they used to this treatment by the Spanish forces, or are they feeling the same rage I am? I got sick and tired of showing my passport, almost even scared if I wouldn't be able to cross. I could feel the anxiety growing within me and my nerves penetrating the question in that split second of, what if?
First off, our driver had to stop at a certain point because he was Moroccan and wasn't allowed to cross the border. For some reason, this hit me hard. I liked our driver a lot. He was very nice and had expertly driven us through some pretty scary positions, including up the side of a mountain. When we said goodbye to him for the last time, dragging our luggage behind us, I wondered what he was thinking. Did he wish he could go with us to cross the border into Spain? Or did he resent us because with our golden tickets, called a U.S. passport, we could basically go wherever we wanted while he was stuck in his country just because he was a Moroccan?
At that moment, all the things I've read and talked about in class regarding how difficult it is for Moroccans to cross the border into Spain confirmed the reality of it all. The Spanish government makes it very difficult for Moroccan immigrants to cross the border. At some point, my classmates and I even saw a Moroccan get arrested by a Spanish officer.
The gates, barbed wire, police, caged walkways, and dogs make a depressing note to end our trip on. The hope that was so evident throughout Morocco is non-existent in this area. I saw an obviously distraught and crying man being led by police into a white building. This is a blank place that feels bereft of emotion, a true no man's land. I feel angry that these Spanish police would be so arrogant as to cast doubt and judgment on the Moroccans passing through. But I also realize how important and strained immigration issues are here. No matter what, this process is a negative influence on Spanish-Moroccan relations. It's a dehumanizing experience and reminds me of a cattle run in the slaughterhouses back home.
Suddenly, I felt guilty for some reason, because it was so easy for me to come and go out of Morocco, but so hard for its citizens to do so. Actually seeing it with my own eyes and experiencing it with my body really made it clear how dangerous and serious crossing the border really was.
This is our last day here in Sallent, Spain, and I'm writing this entry as a reflection. Meeting Mohammed and his family in the mountain village and then staying in Chefchaouen for those few days was an amazing end to our trip. Chaouen was an absolutely beautiful city and the perfect place to end our trip in Morocco. The mountains were beautiful, and our day trip to the park had been spectacular. Though the climb to the Bridge of God had been really hard, it had been worth the view in the end. I think that hike was somewhat physically unwavering, and my skin shielded me from sickness. I'm surprised at my body's ability to exert itself. Even today, I could keep going if there was somewhere else my eyes wanted to take me. This trip has shown me how I carry my body with me and how much different this trip would have been if my body was different even the slightest way. The way I think and the body I travel will always be with me no matter where I go.
We had our group discussion and reflection on the roof of our hotel. That's another thing I'll miss, hanging out on the roof to enjoy the cool night air. And it became clear just how changed we all were by this trip, even if we had a hard time seeing it ourselves. As we went around the circle, it became clear that everyone's worldview had changed. As was the point of this trip, we have now all seen and done more than many Americans ever will. Even those who travel to Morocco will probably not see the shantytowns in Saleh or a remote village in the Rif Mountains. We got to meet Moroccans and they got to meet Americans in a different context than simple tourism. I think we are all more aware now. I know I was touched by the welcome I received here, and now I hope that I can make people who are strangers in a strange land and feeling out of their depth in America feel as comfortable as I was here. I have received unbelievable hospitality and warmth, and I hope that I can share that with somebody who is visiting my home country in turn.
Our last day, my body is exhausted, and I love how Spain is relaxing. Today, I just went shopping and thought about traveling in our own skin. I have been so lucky and not gotten sick yet on this trip. I've done everything on our itinerary. I've even been staying up until 2, talking with friends, and getting up at 7 or 8. My body has been resistant and strong. I climbed a mountain without any problems. My body has been allowing me to see everything and do everything I want to, giving me the opportunity to live 1.5 lives so far on this trip. I feel as though I have been here a lifetime, and today my body is showing me that I have done enough. I have pushed my mind to stay focused, my muscles to stay moving, my energy to be unwavering, and my skin to shield me from sickness. I am surprised at my body's ability to exert itself. Even today, I could keep going if there was somewhere else my legs wanted to take me. This trip has shown me how I carry my body with me, and how much different this trip would have been if my body was different, in even the slightest way. The way I think and the body I travel in will always be with me, no matter where I go.
So we just described a lot, and obviously we wouldn't be able to describe everything in a planned course, but I know I speak for all of us when I say we invite any questions about the trip or anything you want to ask us.